What's up, my wizards? It's Dev and Ziggy. That's right, the Ziggy. Oh my god, from Mtg. We like it of magic. And today we got that wasabi sriracha. It's other words for spicy. I'm tired of using spicy. Anyway, good topic today. Let's talk about the top 10 reprints I want to see the most in Throne of Eldraine. And we're back. Had to cuddle my buddy for a minute. Yeah, I did. I'll probably put it like at the end of the video in the Patreon roll or something. I've just been cuddling my schnookums for a minute. God, I am insufferable. Anyway, reprints. People like talking about those. So today, we're going to do that. Are you leaving, buddy? Oh. Anyway, too many schnugs. But anyway, people, they like them reprints. So just take that again. Anyway, what I was saying about reprints, as I reset for a third time here, is that I've already done this video like 3 other times, and Wizards has never reprinted anything that I've ever said, like, I really would like them to reprint this, at least not by my memory, but my memory is terrible, so keep that in mind. But still, what I decided to do today, instead of just rehash all the old cards that I've talked about before, I wanted to come up with some kind of off-the-wall stuff that you might not think about for this video. So there's going to be some weird picks on this list, but for the honorable mention, I wanted to highlight a card that I have highlighted before, and that is Fireball. I would love to see Fireball back. I mean, you can play your Bane Fires and your Electro Dominances and your Volcanic Geysers and Karavix Torches, I guess. It's all that's well and good, but there's nothing quite like just going like, Fireball! You know, there's something very magic about it. And, like, I could guess maybe there's an argument that Fireball is it's too complicated. No, it's not. It's all you gotta do is pay 1 for each target beyond the first target. That's it. So if you want to target 2, you pay 1 extra. Target 3, you pay 2 extra. It's not super hard to understand, and Fireball is like the quintessential magic spell. We should just have it. We should have that card back. We need a new X spell because Banefire's leaving, so just do Fireball, guys. So honorable mention in the back, I want Fireball back, and I just want to make that clear again. But anyway, on to the actual list here. I wanted to pick, for number 10, a card that is rotating out of the format very soon. A card that's currently in Standard, but it's in like Ixalan or Core Set 19 or Dominaria or something. And I only wanted one of these cards on the list, but if I had to pick one card that I'd really like to see back from the current Standard, it kind of even surprises me that I arrived at this conclusion. But number 10, Fanatical Firebrand. Now, Mono Red loses a bunch of stuff. I mean, aside from just Firebrand, they lose Get You Lava Runner and Vashina Pyromancer, Goblin Chain Whirler, Lightning Strike, and Wizard's Lightning. They just lose their entire deck. So I guess this would be a consolation prize. It's a Mono Red if nothing else. Like, hey, you don't lose all of your really good 1-drops. Plus, I really like this in like Black-Red Judith decks. It goes pretty well in those. Any deck that wants to sacrifice creatures, it goes really nicely in the Cavalcade Calamity deck that's trying to get damage off of like Chandra's Spitfire. Great way to buff your Spitfire. So I like everything about this card, and I just don't think it's time yet. If they're going to reprint one card, especially one card for Mono Red Aggro that wouldn't like keep that deck on top of the format, I think it might be Fanatical Firebrand. I just don't think that it's an unsafe card or anything, and so many decks want it that I'm just not ready for it to be gone yet, I guess. Also, if you wanted to reprint a 1-drop red creature, you could just do Goblin Guide. That was what this slot was going to be, but that's wishful thinking, right? They probably won't do that. So, in lieu of Goblin Guide, I'll take Fanatical Firebrand. You know, a moment ago, I talked about Cavalcade of Calamity. It's a silly card, but I do think it might be, like, maybe the best way to build Mono Red in the upcoming format. Especially while we do have stuff like Spitfire, Cavalcade is really, really good. And you've probably already run into a bunch of Mono Red decks on Arena that'll kill you with Cavalcade, and like Scorch Spitter and a bunch of other stuff. It's a really silly deck, but I do think it's also a really powerful deck, and it might be the best iteration of Mono Red, from what we know so far, at least, in the upcoming format. So a good card to fight those decks would be Ghostly Prison. I'd actually really like this card to get reprinted right now. We're in a Standard where this, first of all, this isn't a broken enchantment. I don't want to go that far, but really good enchantments are a little bit more safe to print because we've got cards that are main deckable, like Mortify and Thrashing Brontodon, and a couple of other things, like Night of Autumn, for instance, that can take out enchantments. And again, you don't necessarily mind main decking. So we can go a little farther with enchantments than usual, and I think Ghostly Prison is relatively safe in this next format, especially considering I don't really see a ton of aggro decks that this would completely screw anyway, you know? from what we see right now, like mono white leaves the format, black white vampires more or less leaves the format, mono red leaves the format. There's not really a whole lot of aggro decks that have any business anyway. So I just don't think the Ghostly Prison would exist to keep down a bunch of decks that would be insane otherwise. So again, I think it's a fairly safe print right now, and it'd be a great sideboard card against decks like Cavalcade and other low-to-the-ground stuff, but I don't think you'd see this in too many main decks. Just a pretty good sideboard piece that I'd like to see reprinted. It's not like it's getting up there in price, and you'll notice that with most of the entries on the list. These are mostly just like spice picks rather than like, this needs to be reprinted for price controls. I would much rather create a spicy list full of interesting cards you may not have thought of, and I think this is one of them. I actually think number 8 encompasses that philosophy well, because I guarantee you weren't thinking about this card. Another white enchantment that's probably of far lower power than any card we've talked about so far, but I would trade all those away for just a little peace of mind. This was actually reprinted not that long ago in like Eldritch Moon, I think, and no one cared. It was not a big deal, so I think it's definitely safe to reprint this, but I think it's actually especially neat right now. In life gain decks, it's going to turn dead draws into growing your Johnny's Pridemate or growing your Bloodthirsty Aerialist. So it's really good for those decks and those decks that play the 4-mana Johnny that just want to get to like 35 life. Angel of Vitality, all of the different life gain effects we have in Standard right now, this obviously goes really, really well with, especially considering those decks don't have a whole lot of good ways of drawing cards, so it's really nice to be able to turn dead draws, when you do get to draw cards, into like actual action for the deck and growing your creatures and stuff. So I like it for that reason, but I also like it as kind of an anti-burn, anti-aggro piece for control decks, but that's probably the least of its uses. Mostly you want to abuse this, and having a discard engine that gains you life might be really nice for the couple of Reanimator decks we have in this format right now. You know, get your discard outlet down on turn 2, help you gain a little bit of life to stay in the game against those aggro matchups, and then just discard fat creatures to it, get them back with Blood for Bones or Bond or Revival or whatever. Just be a really interesting discard outlet for these Reanimator decks that are possible right now. So I'd really like to see Peace of Mind back, even if it doesn't actually do anything. There's a couple of like budget janky things that I'd really like to be able to do right now. Hey, Ziggy's back, just like magically. But anyway, number 7 is actually one of my favorite picks on the list. It's Polluted Bonds. Talking about, I want them to reprint stuff you might necessarily not even think of. And again, that's because I'm tired of getting up here and being like, reprint, terminate. Because, you know, everybody knows that. Do that. Although I guess we have the Devil right now. I'm not sure we even really need that. But anyway, we've all seen these articles. We've all watched these videos. We know the big stuff that needs to get reprinted. So, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper in this one. And I think that Bonds actually is a cool pick right now for the upcoming format, because Field of the Dead is still going to be a card. Like right now we have Rampaging Ferocidon just freshly unbanned. I think that was actually a good decision. That's all I'm going to say on it right now. that was actually a really good decision to keep Scapeshift decks out of the format for the time being, but Ferocidon's going to rotate like soon. That's why I'm doing this video, because rotation's happening like super soon, so... You know, I think that we need another good piece to keep down Field of the Dead decks, and this effectively translates into, you know, whenever they play a land, sure, they'll proc Field of the Dead 1 or 2 or 3 times, depending on how many they have, but at least you gain some life back, and you hit them for some damage, so they can't make too many zombies without just, like, dying, basically. You know, so even though Bonds is 5 mana, I still think that that's a fine cost, because a lot of these Field of the Dead decks won't really get set up until a little bit later in the game, and this is going to punish stuff like, I don't know, Risen Reef and other stuff that just puts lands into play, Cavalier of Thorns and whatnot. There are a few cards like that in the format right now. Circuitous Route is another one. Just anything that puts multiple lands into play, or even extra lands in a given turn, like Risen Reef. This is going to help punish, like, a lot. They can't go off and do the things they want to do, because they'll die. So I think Polluted Bonds is a really interesting pick for getting reprinted right now. But if anything, I'd just like to see a trick or an effect similar to this to, again, kind of be just a good sideboard piece against Field of the Dead decks. Now, number 6 was almost Damnation and Supreme Verdict. But again, these are cards people talk about all the time, right? Like, every format, there is not a standard that goes by. There's really not a set that comes out where there's not someone on the internet somewhere that's like, is this the one? Is Damnation in this set? And it never is, so I doubt, highly doubt it's going to be in this set, although watch it be in there now. Same thing with Supreme Verdict. You know, it'd be nice to have this card back, but I guess we have Ritual of Soot as an analog to Damnation. We have Time Wipe as an analog to Supreme Verdict. So I don't see these cards happening. So instead, with number 6, I went the opposite direction entirely and picked Heroic Intervention, because we need a card that does this and is good in the format right now. Right, but I think we have the Addendum thing, the white card that costs 3 mana. It's like it's so inconsequential at this point that I forgot its name. And at one point, I was a proponent of that card, and it's just like not that. It's just not as good as it needs to be, because at 3 mana, this effect isn't great. Like, people didn't play Make a Stand either, really, when it was in Standard last time. So 3 mana is just too much. Most of the time, you can't just hold up 3 in your aggro deck and wait for them to wrath you. But 2 is a lot more doable, you know? And this can be used as, like, defense against spot removal. You alright, Waverly? Just start freaking out for no reason. Is she okay?
Yeah,
She's just hollering. Out of nowhere. But anyway, where was I? At 2 mana, this can be used to just spot removal defense, or it can obviously be used to protect your team from Ritual of Soot, Time Wipe, any of the stuff we've already talked about, Deafening Clarion, you know, not necessarily Cry the Carnarium, so there's that, but a bunch of sweepers in the format right now, and I'm sure that are about to be printed for that matter, can be thwarted with a Heroic Intervention. And it's always important for aggro decks to have access to a piece like this if they're really going to compete in a format that's looking more and more mid-range and control-oriented as time goes on. Now, for number 5, I promised myself that I would only put 1 land on this list, and there was a bunch that I considered. Like, I considered fast lands. Probably need those back. Maybe Grove of the Burn Willows and a whole cycle of those. That'd be really sweet, wouldn't it? So maybe, possibly. And creature lands, that seems like the obvious one, right? Like Fairy Conclave, Treetop Village, like that could definitely be the thing. But those come into play tapped. I don't like it. We've already got enough of those in the format. So what I ended up landing on here, hear me out, it's Gemstone Mine. Well, first of all, I think Wizards has made it clear through some of the artwork they've released already that they're looking for some of that sweet Disney pseudo-sideways tie-in without having to pay them sweet intellectual property usage fees. So if you don't think that they'll sort of rip off Disney and call back to their own card to also call back to Snow White, then you're freaking crazy, because I think that's exactly the kind of thing they do. So just on flavor alone, Gemstone Mine, 7 Dwarves, they're trying to do a Disney thing, but anyway, I think this is also just really, that'd be awesome to reprint this card right now, because we're all looking at it like, what dual lands are they going to reprint? You know, what dual lands are going to be in this set? Or what new dual lands are going to be? And some people are still, like I said about Grove of the Burn Willows, like excited to see a whole cycle of that land. But I don't know. I don't know if they're going to do that. I especially don't know if they're going to do that just yet. Maybe we'll have to wait for a slightly later set for that. I think it would actually be really cool to print Gemstone Mine right now. And I know that might lead to a glut of like 3 and 4 and possibly even 5 color decks, but I kind of really, really like that magic an awful lot. And we've already got a bunch of 3 color decks in the format, so what does it matter? There are even some 4 and 5 color decks at the moment that exist in Standard, so I don't actually think Gemstone Mine would shake that much up at the end of the day. It was already reprinted in Time Spiral, and that was like forever ago, you know, like Tarmogoyf got printed for the first time like a couple of sets after that in Future Sight, so I'd say that it getting reprinted in Time Spiral, probably not the absolute best argument, but all I was trying to say, as I rebuke myself here, is that the card was reprinted like not super long ago. You know, they weren't printing like incredibly busted cards back then. Yes, they were. Still, point stands. They have reprinted the card into Standard before, and I think they could do it again without too much consequence. That said, I do think it's like the least safe card to reprint so far on the list, because this, from number 5 on, is where we're going to get into the stuff that I'm probably going to get like a lot of comments about, like, you really think they could do this? Actually, with the rest of these, I do think that you actually could, even though some of these are going to sound slightly crazy. Like number 4, Cruel Tutor. Alright, this is probably the one that they can't do the most on the list, and number 1 is one they really can't do, so that's saying a lot, but I think that this would be like probably even more unsafe to print than number 1, which kind of puts it at number 4. I just don't think they'll ever do this. Super long outside shot of it, but it's not on the reserve list, even though it's from way back when in Portal, and hasn't really been reprinted. So, it's probably time. There's a really played Commander card that costs like $50 right now, so I would love to see a reprint, and I'd love to see it in Standard. The 3 mana might be a little too light, because this effect is really, really good, especially in a format where you have Teferi. 3 mana Teferi is going to let you cast this at your opponent's end step. So that's, again, it's probably not like super safe. But at the same time, I'd like to see a replacement for Mastermind's Acquisition and other tutor-like cards that's not a 4 mana borderline unplayable card. I would much rather see like a really playable tutor, but tutors are something that there's a really fine line to. You know, like Mausoleum Secrets looked really, really good to me when I first saw it. Haven't seen any play yet. Still think it's a really good card. But, you know, tutors are either really, really bad or far too good to see Standard play. And this is probably in the latter category. Definitely not in the former category. But my hope is that it's just balanced enough to see a reprint one of these days. Probably won't get reprinted into Standard, but I think it probably wouldn't be too big of a problem. But then again, it might ruin everything. So let's go on to number 3 here, which I actually think is like probably, if I had to get like really speculative here, the most likely card on the entire list to actually get reprinted. And that's Lightning Helix. Now, my spec on this is that the Rowan Planeswalker deck is going to be red and white. And Rowan after the comma, Rowan's name is Intrepid Spark Mage. So in a red and white deck, you got a Spark Mage Planeswalker, Lightning Helix. Now, I did a video the other day that I didn't think was going to get much traction, but apparently people have watched it, to say the least. That's the theory I have, the stupid little theory that I try to make very clear is a stupid theory that I don't actually believe. And yet some people are still like, this is never going to happen. How could you believe it's going to happen? It's not. I say not to take it seriously. But anyway, you've probably seen it at this point. I put out a video the other day, my theory that Lightning Bolt is going to be in Throne of Eldraine. Again, silly conspiracy theory. I've got some evidence for it, but again, at the end of the day, I make it clear that I don't even believe it. That said, Lightning Helix, I think there's a much, much better shot. It's obviously a safer card to reprint than freaking Lightning Bolt, right? That's a tough sell, but Lightning Helix, a little bit easier, I think, to sell to you. First of all, it's going to be great in Jeskai decks. You know, a great way to blow a creature away, gain a little bit of life back. It goes really nicely with Hero Precinct 1. Shouldn't have to tell you that. All these decks that play like a Johnny's Pridemate, again, like Bloodthirsty Aerialist, 4 mana Johnny that makes a Johnny's Pridemates, would love having Lightning Helix in the format. And even Feather, a cute little trick here. You can hit your own Feather with a Lightning Helix and gain 3 life a turn. If you want to do that, at least it keeps the card from being dead against control and stuff. So I think that Lightning Helix would fit a lot of little niches in the format right now without being like that broken, you know? And like in those Jeskai control decks I was talking about, you have like Lightning Helix to clean anything up on turn 2 during your opponent's end step. And you hold up Absorb. You're just gaining all the life. But I, again, don't think it's like, I don't think it's that broken. I really don't. So we're going to need something to replace Lightning Strike in the upcoming format. Hopefully it's not just Lightning Strike again. Hopefully Wizards will actually do it this time and reprint Lightning Helix. You know, it's one of those cards I was talking about earlier where everyone knows it needs to be reprinted, but I think there's such a greater chance than usual that it gets reprinted this time around that I wanted to give it a spot on the list. Number 2 is another one of my favorite entries, and another one of those that I think there's at least slightly, I mean like a couple of percentage chance, you know, points more of a chance might get reprinted in this next set. And that's Palace Jailer. And the only reason I use this is because I think the Monarch mechanic might get printed in this set in some capacity. I'd really like to see Palace Jailer back. It's my favorite of all the Monarch cards. And it would go a long way to replace things like Ixalan's Binding and even Hostage Taker in the next format. It's kind of an amalgamation of those two things. And I think it would replace those pretty nicely in terms of function, at least. But I think the Monarch mechanic is what's more likely to get printed than this or another card that already has Monarch. There are a few that I wanted to put in this slot, but again, I think Palace Jailer is the one I'd like to see the most, you know? And these Monarch cards probably do need a bump in availability, even though Palace Jailer is only like $3.50, $4 right now, most sites. But that said, it probably won't stay that way forever. So if you're going to print Monarch into this set as a mechanic, which they very well may, and I think there's at least some shot of it. I mean, at least, you know, look at the name of the set. So if it does happen, bring Palace Jailer back. But for number 1, I wanted to really swing for the fences with number one. And this list has mostly been populated with like stuff that's relatively cheap. It doesn't need a price control kind of reprint. And I know that's what most people want to see from these videos is price control reprints. But this isn't a Masters set or anything. You know, it's not Modern Horizons. We're looking at stuff that can be reprinted into Standard. And I think I've already dipped my toe far over that line a couple of times on this list with things like Cruel Tutor. But this one is another one that will just never, they're not going to do it. They won't do it. This is me daring them to do it. So don't think for a second I think they'll do it. But I at least want to make an argument for a card that I think is probably safer than you think it is. Because there's no way that you think Sylvan Library is safe to reprint. That's a lot of text, and there's going to be a lot of players who have never seen this card before, but the most concise way to look at this card is when you go to draw your card for the turn, you draw 3 cards. You have to put 2 of those cards back on top of your library, but you can pay 4 life for each card you'd like to keep. So you get to draw 1 card. You basically get to like scry 3 in a way at the beginning of your draw step. You keep one of those cards in your hand, put the other 2 back, but you can always pay extra life to keep those cards rather than put them back. 4 life is really, really steep, but it's traditionally very worth it in decks that want this card. So, yeah, you're probably screaming at your TV. No one watches this on TV. I do. I watch YouTube on my TV, but I imagine your phone? That's probably what most of you are watching this on, isn't it? You're probably screaming at your screen like, there's no way. There's no, and you're probably right. You're 99% right on that, but I actually think Sylvan Library, again, slightly more safe than you might think. 4 life, really super steep, and this is a do-nothing enchantment on the turn it comes into play. Like I said earlier, we're in a format full of main deckable enchantment hate. Do I really have to go through it all again? There's a Mortify, Thrashing Brontodon, Knight of Autumn, and a bunch of other stuff, for that matter, that's somewhat main deckable and can take out enchantments the turn after you actually drop the Sylvan Library. So I think that there's a fair amount of clean answers to this right now. And it's just not as impactful as it normally would be. That said, it would be super impactful. Like, it would be a very played card in Standard. Although, if there was a card I could compare it to that's rotating, it's Search for Azcanta. And in some ways, I think Search for Azcanta is just as powerful, and in some cases more powerful. Because you're going to get, for no life, you're going to get the best of the top 4 of your cards in your control deck every turn after a certain point in the game, and the initial mana investment is the same, 2 mana. So even though Search is probably the worst card, which is really saying a lot considered how played Search for Azcanta was, I still think it's a reasonable comparison to make. Let me put it that way. And I don't know that Sylvan Library would just break Standard completely. I think that's the kernel, the bottom, the actual like distilled portion of my argument here is not that this wouldn't be a heavily played card in Standard, but I'm not sure that in the current Standard environment that this would break Standard. That said, not going to get reprinted. I just really like to see it. That's my list. Don't punch me too hard in the face in the comments section. I think that I was actually doing pretty good up until I said, well, Cruel Tutor. Cruel Tutor is probably the one that people stopped and commented about first, but then Sylvan Library was, what are you thinking, Dev? I want to get a conversation started. How do you feel about that? Sylvan Library actually not as broken as it looks nowadays? Maybe. You can tell that I know that I'm going to get killed when my voice goes that high. You said, it might not be that bad. It probably will be, but let me know why. Give me a detailed argument as to why down there in the comments section. I'm all ears. But also let me know what stuff you'd like to see reprinted. Because again, we've covered the obvious stuff to death, you know, like Engineered Explosives or so, Chalice of the Void. It just won't happen. Snapcaster Mage needs a reprint, doesn't it? It's not, not gonna happen. Neither is Sylvan Library, but it's a spicier pick than Snapcaster Mage. So, but let me know if you've got especially any off-the-wall stuff that you want to see reprinted down there in the comments section, and I'll read them. So I read your comments, just so you know I do that. So let me know down there, and then do all the other stuff on your way out. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't done it yet. It's Throne of Eldraine spoilers. Throne of Eldraine. Throne of Eldraine spoilers. Right down the street now, just a few days away as I record this video, and you want to be subscribed for that. Plus all the deck techs that come after. Check out the Patreon. Turns out I got one of those, just $1 a month. It's like a soda a month. We'll let you vote on what content you want to see next, including deck techs and the like. And lots of other stuff. We'll let you know what's happening before it even happens. It's like magic. That was, puns. Anyway, just $1 a month, and honestly, I'm worth it. So get over to the Patreon, and then check out TCG Player if you want to pre-order any of these cards for that Commander deck, because, doesn't matter if they get reprinted or not. If this is the first time you've ever seen Sylvan Library and you're like, that's a ridiculous amount of card advantage, get in my Commander deck, then check out the link down there in the doobly-doo. Do that stuff. But anyway, I think I'm done for this one. I'm done from the place. It's always so deflating when I'm just like, I'm done from the place. I want to just talk about Magic cards. But anyway, I guess I'm done for now. I'm going to turn it over to you. Let me know how you feel about all the things down there in the sideboard, and I will catch you cats later. I'm done from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind. Get a good kitty. Yeah. Oh, goodness. Oh, chest scritches. You love her. You love his papa. Oh. Hello. You're a good boy. Oh, what is that? What is happening? Oh, boy, you shed. Cheesy, crazy cheese and rice. Little shed ninja. That's what you are.